Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Funnel Trade. So here we are about a week after the full release of Foundations last Friday, where the collector boxes selling at a wholesale price of about $197, the normal for a standard expansion collector box, had gone all the way up to $309 on release day and for several days after, and even now, 6 days later, they're only down to $299. So they've lost $10 as the TCG expansion life cycle attempts to do its thing. And there's a little bit of sell side pressure at that under $300 mark before it gaps back up to 305 and back towards 310 eventually. Now, the fact that we are coming in on Black Friday next week means that we're probably going to be back over 300. It's performing very well. There's no denying that a standard expansion collector box at $100 over wholesale on release day. Have we ever seen that before? Boy, Kamigawa did really well. It did really well at release, but it still took a while for it to come up afterwards once people started realizing just how rare the Hitasugu Neon Ink parallel cards were. And even then, it only got up to the 280, 290 range before it stalled out and pulled back under the weight of a second wave. So, Foundations has done amazing. But let's take a little trip backwards and think about where we were in the 4 to 6 weeks before Foundations release. We had a lot of information in the market that, this was a poorly received set, that it wasn't going to do well, that putting a standard expansion into the rotation for 5 years was just going to be awful. And, for standard balance, for the standard metagame, maybe it will be. That's kind of outside the wheelhouse of this channel. I personally don't think it's a great idea to have an expansion stuck in standard for 5 years, but, I'm not Mark Rosewater, so whatever. But we were told that, pre-orders were the worst for any standard set in years. Whole lot of things. And that generally the investor performance of this product was going to be very, very poor. And even I talked about it a little bit, that my concern was if you keep something in standard for 5 years, at some point, all of the underlying cards are going to be printed to oblivion. All of the cards in the expansion will have plenty of copies out in the secondary market, and that will pull down the prices of any of the cool variants in the collector boxes, and we should expect in the long term for that to hurt the collector box performance. And of course, what we hadn't suspected was a couple things. The incredible print run reductions that WotC has done and continues to do, and occasionally, like with Foundations, surprises us with how deep the reductions were. The discipline on distribution and the ability to get people excited about the contents of the box. And so it outperformed what all of us thought, even what I thought. And now, what do we have to rely on if you've missed out on the boxes so far? Well, the TCG expansion life cycle has about 8 more days until Black Friday. And then you'll have a narrow window at the beginning of Black Friday where you can get the full maximum $50 per item discount off of TCG Player. And then the sell side starts tightening up. The price goes up. Maybe there's a second wave of collector boxes. Maybe not. Sometimes there is. Sometimes there isn't. And so essentially the pressure on the product will be greater and greater to go up. And at some point, the upwards leg of the TCG expansion life cycle will take effect as the supply of the product tightens. One day, the underlying set will go out of print, and that will slowly increase the demand for some of the singles. Now, that will be an incredibly lagging response on something like Foundations that is in print for 5 years. But the collector boxes are already doing pretty well. And what's the point I'm trying to make here? It's that once again, the negativity didn't work out. And this is something that's been unbelievably frustrating to me my entire career as an investor in the stock market and now the TCG world, is just how negative everyone is. And I understand it somewhat. But I don't understand why people don't quit doing it. So here's the thing. Every day you go to a job you hate to exchange some of your pathetically short life for money. And then you have to use that money on a lot of things you don't like. A lot of insurance, a lot of bills, a mortgage, maybe you have debt, all kinds of stuff. You got to eat, you got to clothe your kids, you got to pay for all kinds of things. And then if you have a little bit left over, maybe you invest it and you attempt to grow it into more over time. And so it's understandable to me that people get incredibly emotional about the value of their assets, what assets they're in, how they're swinging up and down, and all of that. I understand. The problem is when it comes to investing, having short-term emotional decision-making is the worst thing you can do. And yes, people are upset and people get negative over investments, but what do we see again and again and again in Magic? What have we seen for the last 2 years as the market has recovered? We've seen collector box print runs tighten, we've seen the reinsertion of value, and we've seen boxes, even standard boxes, jump up in price right after release. Go back to Duskmourn, that's given back just a hair now down into the 240s. Bloomburrow still doing good. Now, Outlaws and Murders, yeah, a bit rough, both up from their lows, but not yet doing great. Still time to buy. So, people are always too negative about their investments. And as I relate and have related before on this channel, I have known people who sold positions in blue chip companies because the stock goes down 3% in one day. I know people who, as quickly as they could, sold out of Walmart and Target one day about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, when both companies delivered bad quarterly results on the same day. You look at the two biggest retailers in the country, brick and mortar retailers, that is, Walmart and Target. What, you think these companies are going bankrupt? You think they won't exist? But people were racing to sell out of their positions based on a single quarterly report. And all this negativity, does it get investors anywhere? Most of the time, no. Most of the time, the negativity moves them backwards. And the problem is that most of the information in a market is unimportant short-term noise. And people are too emotionally grabbed by that noise. Nobody is on YouTube or on Reddit talking about how this is day 96 of the fallout from banning Jeweled Lotus. Nobody's saying it because no one cares. The world has moved on. Jeweled Lotus will get unbanned one day now that Magic controls the format. And when it gets unbanned, no one will be particularly upset. A lot of people will be happy because they'll get to play their copies of that card again, but no one's going to go back and say, oh man, WotC just ripped the Band-Aid off of that old wound. But at the time, I was getting messages from people, I was getting comments on my video about how, man, this is it. It's the end of Commander, Magic is dead. And all through 2021 and 22, and even some into 2023, all the messages I got, all of the comments I got about Magic is dead. And where are we now? We just had a standard expansion collector box release at $100 over wholesale price. That's where we are. That's how dead Magic is. And I'll get into conversations with people about small, scalpel around the edges kind of topics in Magic. And people will be convinced that this is the end of Magic. This is the thing that's finally going to kill it. Ignoring that we're on 31 years now of Magic the Gathering. The rule set is incredible. It's refined to such a great degree that most other games simply seek to copy it. And yet, fringe issues within the community are supposed to matter. What are the issues that do matter? We're here at Final Trade. We're here as TCG investors. To us, what are the issues that matter? The last sale price of an asset, the depth of the sell side of the order book, that matters. The gaps in the order book, those matter. You know, if you can buy through 3 boxes and then the price goes up $100, well, that's important information. The sales velocity is important. Comparables to past sets for things like sales quantity, restocks, prices, those kind of things can be interesting. You can sometimes make some weak predictions based on them. But all the rest is pretty much short-term noise that we just forget about. All kinds of things. Every disaster of Magic that people have told me is the end of the game in the last only 4 years. And yet here we are. I don't know how to convince everyone to stop being like that as an investor, to stop being so negative, to stop thinking that, well, the world's going to end. Well, this is the end of investing. This is the end. The assets are going to zero. I don't know how to do it. You know, I have a friend who, before the election a couple weeks ago, they were feeling really negative about the potential result. And so they sold all of their stocks and bought gold, paper gold fund. And, you know, looking at the performance a couple of days ago, I didn't go look again before I started filming just now, but I looked a couple of days ago, and since the election, gold had underperformed the stock market by 8%. So that's 8% potential gain that he missed out on, plus any potential fees for having sold and then bought into this other fund, if there are any. So he missed out on 8% return on all of the wealth that he has in his brokerage account because he was so negative, because he literally thought a rock would produce more value than all of the best companies in the S&P 500. You know, it's that kind of negativity that hobbles people as investors. And so you have to become unemotional about it. And you have to learn that most of what you hear is unimportant short-term noise. Because once again, here we are. Foundations boxes have collapsed all the way to $299 from $309. And now we're staring down Black Friday a mere 8 days from now. And Foundations, well, if I just had to take an up-down bet on it being above or below $300 at the end of the year, I'm going to bet the boxes are above $300 at the end of the year. So don't stay negative too long. And if you have the discipline and the courage to do it, sometimes just take the optimistic view on an asset. Just do it against whatever inside of you is telling you to stay with the pessimistic view. Just try it out sometimes. You know, I'm lucky that I have some problems with understanding emotions. I can feel emotions. I can observe other people's emotions, but I have problems where I don't exactly understand all the time why people have those emotions. And so that helps me a lot as an investor because I can just very easily turn emotion off from all of my decisions. And I can say, well, what do I think is going to happen? The last 4, 6, 8 standard expansion collector boxes are doing in between okay to spectacular. What should I expect the next 4 to do? I should probably be optimistic about their performance when they come out. Ravnica Remastered collector boxes last January, they turned out to do great. What are they at today? 320, 330, 350, somewhere around there? What should we expect from Innistrad Remastered? We should probably expect it to do pretty good when it comes out. On a side note, you know, I had talked some last year around this time that one of the things that a stronger bull market would do is to cause us to consider pre-ordering more often. Maybe it's the time when you should consider pre-ordering the next Pokemon release, the next Magic release, because WotC and Pokemon both have showed this year that they're doing really great. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about them. So think about it. Think about what I think in my head every time is the words, and yet here we are. Because for all the pontificating about doom and gloom, for all of the scalpel around the edges reasons that people might think Magic is dead, here we are. And it's performing spectacularly. And I still don't see anything that makes me think that's going to change in the long term. Let me know what you think, guys. Thanks to everyone who makes this content possible, especially my very generous supporters on Patreon. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join me on Final Trade.